You're listening to eCommerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder, and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
Well, welcome back to eCommerce Fastlane. I am your host, Steve Hutt. Now, today we're going to dive into something that I believe is probably keeping a lot of Shopify merchants up at night, and that's kind of the growing complexity that's happening right now with kind of the user experiences that actually convert while trying to manage these customer acquisition costs. I mean, we know that acquisition costs are rising right now for a lot of reasons. Number one is rolling into Q4 right now. There's a lot more competition. There's just words out here about getting share of wallet, and people are shopping early. And I'm seeing all these Black Friday and Cyber Monday webinars and PDFs, and there's lots of craziness going on. US kids are back in school. In Canada, where I'm at, it's like, the following week, it's on a lot of people's radar that summer, unfortunately, is kind of done. But what does that mean for Q4? And I think that's the reason why I have my guest on today. It's Greg Tull. He's the director of marketing for a company called Classy Llama. And they're an agency. They've been literally in the trenches. We chatted before recording today, but they've been in e-commerce for a really long time. More focused on other platforms in the past, the Magentos of the world for quite a while. But they're firmly entrenched now in the Shopify ecosystem, and they're working really diligently now on the Shopify Plus side of the business. They've been doing this for almost 17 years. And one thing nice I've learned a little bit kind of before recording today, Greg and his team really built and optimized like hundreds of e-commerce sites, and they have a very unique perspective. And that's kind of why I brought him on. It's not just a generic kind of like agency partner, doing Shopify builds. They have a very unique perspective on AI and how to use kind of smart kind of UX strategies really to differentiate, like what's your competitive moat. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of stores try to figure out. They struggle with is like, how do we get these conversions, and how do we build like lasting customer loyalty? So I'm excited to unpack and learn about the latest and greatest and kind of what's happening on the boots on the ground today. So hi, Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, Steve, thank you so much for having us. We appreciate it. Ready to dive in.
Oh yeah, this is great. And like I told you in the green room before recording, Classy Llama has definitely been on my radar along with a few other kind of agency partners, and been recommended and vetted along the way to merchants that I used to manage in Shopify. And so it's nice that it comes full circle today, that we actually get to, over the years, now finally get to say, well, where's Classy Llama today? What are they working on, and how are they helping businesses? The big elephant in the room right now is, and I think you guys use this language a lot, is you're focusing on this thing called practical AI applications rather than just all the AI hype that's going on. So when a Shopify merchant like maybe comes to you and wants to implement AI, let's say, I don't know, for product recommendations or customer support, like what are some of the step-by-step approaches that you think about? Obviously they want ROI, but there's also this additional tech layer. So I was just curious on your mindset around that.
We engage with this question a lot because, as you know, AI has just exploded in the last couple of years, and there's so much hype around the conversation. And so I think we run into a lot of merchants who they're aware of it. You can't avoid it, of course, but now they're really skeptical about whether or not it's actually going to turn into value for them, if you're not getting revenue out of it. So one thing that we would always encourage people to do from the beginning is pick a goal and then baseline that goal before you begin. So maybe that's your average order value, and you want to see a lift from recommendations, or you want a support deflection, so less support requests from your clients. And then let's start by tracking that. So we're going to capture that. And then you need to fix the basics first. So think about like cleaning up your product info, your tags, your variants, confirming tracking for add to cart and support contacts. And after you've done that, the next thing you want to do is you want to pilot that AI implementation where it's going to matter most. So your recommendations might be your top product display pages plus your cart drawer, and think only in-stock, high margin, make sense sort of combos. And then for support, if you're going to do something that's bot powered, that can be immensely helpful. And then you can back that up with your FAQs, your policies, your specs. But in any case, you want to make sure that there's a clear and obvious option to go talk to a human instead. I'm sure anyone listening's probably had this experience, right? Where you get on and maybe you're with a chat bot or a support bot somewhere and you're talking to it. And then you're like, okay, this isn't helpful. I need to go talk to a person, but it won't let you, right? So now you have to sort of get off and go find how to contact a person instead. They're only helpful to the user experience if they're helpful to the user, right? And so at the point that they stop being helpful, give people an out to go talk to a person. And then you want to A/B test all of that. Compare it with and without your AI implementation. And then you only want to keep it if those baseline metrics, those goals that you're tracking, let's see, you're seeing a lift in add to cart or your support requests are down. And then closing the loop for people, right? It's using unanswered questions to improve your FAQs, your product display pages, ensuring that your recommendations respect inventory. And then you have to scale that thoughtfully at the end, because as you add placements gradually, give it a dashboard, give yourself the ability to do quarterly tune-ups. And then the bottom line, what I'd say to people is that AI has to speed decisions, either for people to buy or to get an answer. And if it doesn't do those things, then don't keep it. Then you've just added an expensive tech layer.
I read this on LinkedIn about you guys are talking a lot about these UX improvements. And I think it's quite a fascinating topic because I think AI can really be used to analyze kind of like user behavior, which then could probably alert your team or even the founders and marketers about potential UX improvements. This could be A/B testing, other different things. Like for Shopify merchants, I think a lot of them, they might be drowning in a lot of data right now. Like how do you help them identify like which signal matters most if they're going to make some of these kind of smart like UX decisions?
I think, and probably a lot of agencies do this too, but we're always going to start with a discovery. And that's the process of our solutions architects going in and understanding, well, what matters to your business specifically. Because if you're running in a B2B context, it might be time to request a quote that you actually want as your metric. It might be, well, what's the minimum number of clicks that somebody has to do to get to either a checkout or to contact a salesperson to help them assemble a quote. So it's always a process of discovering for that individual client. And that's how we've approached it every time, because we want to make sure that the value is going to be there when that implementation is done.
The other thing I think about too is that mobile commerce, when I think about responsiveness, most of the Shopify themes and stuff typically will scale to the size of the screen. Some brands choose like full mobile solutions. We think like Plobal or TapCart, and they kind of run separate dedicated mobile. What's Classy Llama's kind of mindset around responsive theme design and selecting that versus maybe going with a dedicated mobile app?
Usually responsive theme design is our preference when it comes to doing the implementation for people. Obviously, in the past, there was a lot more dedicated setups for a mobile experience, but responsiveness is so much better now. And even talking about Shopify specifically, so many of these themes are designed to flex between those different environments. And so you don't want to have to go build 2 or 3 different environments for a different kind of device if you can build one that has the ability to sort of morph based on the presentation for the user.
I guess the only reason I ask that question is because I know there are other technologies right now that are web-based technologies that, but we talk about like push notifications and having kind of like this physical real estate on a phone. On the flip side, though, it can be quite challenging. People sometimes don't really want to download and have another app on their phone, even though maybe there could be a faster experience by having a localized, kind of more dedicated piece of technology on your phone. It's a challenging act to try to get people to want to download it versus, I think you're right, the web experience and the way Shopify has built a lot of the default themes and then some of the custom programming that's available now, it will adapt to the environment of the screen.
Speaking for myself, Steve, I'm actually very reluctant to download additional apps. We live in such an information-saturated age, right? That it's like, I already can't keep up with all of the noise and all of the content that's around me. So I don't want to add another thing to look at to keep up with, to turn notifications off for. So instead, I want to be able to go interact with that experience for purchasing when it's relevant to me. And then I don't want it to be on my radar when it's not anymore. And so I think as we talk so much about UX and understanding how significant of a differentiator that is now, I was just having a conversation with my brother yesterday, and he buys a lot of aftermarket automotive parts. And he was saying, look, I can look at 4 different stores and I'll even pay extra to go to a store that is well designed, appears trustworthy, and has a great UX because I want to get in, purchase my part, and get out. And I trust that it's then going to get delivered to me. So that's what I would say to a lot of people is, there's this idea we talk about expending mental calories. Think about simplifying the process so that somebody has to expend the fewest calories possible and also not keep clutter on their radar. It's like you want them to have the awareness when it's relevant, and then you want that awareness to kind of go away or settle into the background until it becomes relevant again.
Now, what about this kind of path to purchase? Because I think it's really important. I think when someone comes to a site, we can talk about, like, let's say on a high level, 3% conversion rate, most people are around 2% conversion rate. So knowing that, it's just like, how do you streamline that checkout flow? Like, are there any, I don't want to say best practices, I don't really want to use that word, but like, how do merchants kind of audit their own kind of current navigation and then potentially identify like where they might be losing customers along that journey?
Let's talk about it specifically in the mobile context, right? So we know that around 60% of e-commerce purchases are now happening on mobile, and that number is just continuing to rise. In fact, some people are of the opinion that that'll push closer to 75% by the end of this year. So you can just see that the purchasing behavior has changed. So some things that we would flag in a mobile audit, and I think it's easy for people to kind of fall into a good enough trap, which is to say, okay, it works and it's responsive, we're fine. You don't want your first screen to be too crowded. Again, think information saturation. Don't overload the person who's coming to view that. So announcement bars, pop-ups, sliders that push the product below the fold. You want people to be able to see price, a primary photo, and add to cart quickly. Otherwise, you're leaking intent. Then hidden search and filters. Tiny icons or buried filters make finding products a chore for the end user. So we make search obvious and give, Shopify size, color, fit, quick chips up top. And then you need to have a sticky add to cart. Again, we're talking about speed to purchase here. So make it really easy for somebody to get that into their cart and be able to make that buy. And then variant friction for people, which would be like sizes and colors off screen, confusing swatches, error messages after tapping add to cart. You want to bring your size guide, your fit, your help next to the selector and then prevent surprise errors for people. And then, as always, of course, being cautious about slow, heavy media and what that's going to do for the experience. And then a cart drawer that traps people. So on mobile, a cramped drawer that hides totals or upsells, shoving the checkout button down, and editing is painful. So you want to keep the edit clear and you want the checkout button to always be visible. I have literally been in purchase scenarios before, even on mobile, where I'll put something in my cart and then I'm like, now I'm in the cart and ready to go buy. And then they keep adding and actually making it difficult for me to check out, and I'll abandon it. I'm like, oh, this is annoying. I'll go find somewhere easier to buy. So that's what you want to think about. And then a cost showing up too late is a significant thing for people too, in terms of like shipping, taxes, return policy, delivery ETAs that aren't visible until checkout. You want to try to surface things like, hey, it'll ship by next Tuesday. Shipping is free over $50 on the product display page in the cart. And then tiny tap targets and low contrast for people. Buttons, filters that are hard to find or hard to hit one-handed. You want to think about how can that experience be thumb friendly. So I want one thumb clarity. And then preferably no more than 3 taps to a relevant product. A sticky add to cart, express pay, visible. So here's how I'd approach it in terms of changing it for somebody in, let's say, first week wins. You want to make search obvious, add a few one-tap filters, add a sticky thumb-friendly add to cart on your product display page. You want to bring your size/fit help next to variants and block the add to cart until a variant is chosen. And then show delivery estimate and returns for people on the product display page. And then kill or delay pop-ups. I know as a marketer, it can feel really tempting to put that in for somebody. But from a UX side, I think they're probably universally hated. Like, I don't know that I've ever gone to a site and then a pop-up happened and I was like, wow, I'm now happier about my experience because of this pop-up. I could never have figured out how to sign up for your newsletter unless this, interrupted whatever I was working on. So I'd say on mobile, shoppers, they buy when the page makes deciding effortless with one thumb. And then anything that hides the next step, even if it feels good enough, costs you. So those would be the things that I would encourage somebody to audit on their own site, especially in a mobile context, and the kind of things we would want to think about when helping optimize UX for somebody.
I'm definitely in alignment on all those things. It's pretty funny about the thumb because I agree with you. There's some low contrast, small things just don't quite work out well. And I think you really need to think about that. The other area that I think is really interesting too, talking about like this kind of path to purchase, is kind of the upsell and the cross-sell kind of opportunities. There are different tools like Rebuy Engine and a few others that do something quite interesting. And it's interesting where you can have almost like a premium product upgrade kind of thing. I've seen a lot where it's kind of good, better, best kind of tiered pricing structure, which I think is quite interesting. And then the other thing is I find that volume or bundled offers to increase the average order value, like buy two, get 10% off, and kind of like encouraging a larger order size. What's your thought on these kind of upsell strategies that are currently available?
I think that they can be fantastic as long as they work. Recent example, I was purchasing some pants recently from a retailer that I particularly like. And, they gave me an upsell option at the end. They're like, hey, if you want this in a different color, you can buy another pair for 30% off. And it was already slotted in for, the measurements of the pants that I needed. And I liked the deal, so I bought the pants. But then literally our president here the other day had a similar experience. Same merchant, actually. He wanted to buy the same pants. He liked mine. And so he went on to buy them. And then their recommendation actually broke. And they were recommending like female tops to him. And he's like, what? Yeah. So now it's totally irrelevant. So now it's actually reduced the user experience because he doesn't want to buy, a shirt for a lady. Like, he's just trying to buy pants as a guy. And so my response to that would be, as long as it's working, I think it could be okay. But if it's not working, then it's a definite negative. So it's a little bit of a two-edged sword there. And in any case, if you are going to do it, you need to minimize how disruptive it's going to be. So maybe it's one page, you make the recommendation, I can say no thanks and just move on. Don't push me too far. You're going to start to frustrate me in the purchasing experience.
I think there's a little bit of concept around the strategic timing and placement, as you said, like, especially if there's like an upsell going to happen, they're in this buying kind of mindset right now. The in-cart upsell, with a slide-out drawer or whatever. I think to make it easy to add and remove items, upsells and cross-sells and things like that, I think it's interesting because it doesn't really break the checkout flow because it's all part of the process. So that would be my one thought. And then the other side of it is the post-purchase opportunity. So, once somebody has made a purchase, like what happens next? Like on this thank you page, which a lot of times people use for like, how'd you hear about us? Or, other different types of things just to kind of corroborate some marketing spend to the purchase of this. But it's just like offering a post-purchase upsell, I think is quite interesting because they don't really require to re-enter their payment details.
Yeah. Well, and Shop does that really well, actually. It's like, hey, do you want to add this? And you're like, actually, that's relevant to me. I like it. Yep, go ahead. And then not having to go back through that checkout process, highly valuable.
You use the word like kind of smart filtering because I think there are some people that are listening that have really large catalogs. And I think this gets not just commodity vendors, but there's lots of people with like, thousands of SKUs. So knowing that, and you guys are really big into UX and making some good decisions for the site visitor, like what's your concept around filtering mostly for these large catalogs? Because like, I don't know if there's an AI component to this that we just kind of need to surface some of the more popular collections and products as part of the filtering process. The reason I ask this question, because I've seen some old school Magento builds with these crazy left navigations that just have so many different options. And it's really hard to navigate through it all and filter down, right? So I'm just curious on kind of how you guys think about it.
I'll talk about two different things. So on a little bit of an older school side, we've done this before on Magento. One merchant that we worked with had 625,000 SKUs and over 20,000 product categories. And they're looking at moving towards 1 million. They supply parts for tractors and like lawn equipment, that kind of thing. So you're talking lots of very product specific requirements there. So in any case, it's like fitment. What's going to apply to me specifically, or what's going to apply to my product specifically? And we've actually seen some great examples of people doing this using retrieval augmented generation with AI, RAG, right? And so we've actually built our own RAG model here that we use internally, and that we have a couple of implementation projects we're currently working on with some clients. And so that can look like if somebody comes to your site and they can now converse with your RAG and say, hey, I'm going to a wedding in Greece in this time of year on a beach. And now what happens is your search results or recommendations made by that RAG is in consideration of, okay, time of year, location, level of look, let's say, right? So how classy is this versus how casual? Okay, so we know that it's a wedding. It's somewhat more classy, but it's on a beach. So we're not talking probably full suit and tie here. We're certainly not talking tux. Like, what's the right balance? And then it can make product recommendations based on those parameters. So that's one way to help hone in across a vast product catalog for people. And then the other thing, like I said, is kind of that fitment component. So what is within the realm of relationship to what they're currently looking at. So if I'm getting on a site, what I'm looking to buy is, let's say, a hiking rain jacket, a waterproof jacket. Well, I don't want you to be giving me product recommendations for, a woolly pulley pullover, because like, that's great. Wool's amazing, but I'm looking for something waterproof here. And so I think relevance is always the answer to that. Is this going to fit into kind of the same subject matter of what you're looking for? Because I want to see objects. Like, don't go and give me something that's completely outside of the vein that I'm down. Does that make sense?
I love the RAG idea because I think it really does make a lot of sense. And I think these tools now really can pull inventory, like the wedding example, and say, okay, well, we need like wedding attire, and we're looking for breathable fabrics, let's say, that are suitable for a beach. And then all of a sudden, well, what about weather in Greece? And then maybe reviews. Imagine pulling reviews and stuff about like people mentioning that they bought this stuff for a beach wedding or a similar event. It's so interesting that all these things could be pulled in, and all of a sudden then you're surfacing kind of like at least an educated guess that this is likely what would make sense for what this particular site visitor is looking for. This is amazing. So it actually avoids a lot of the choice paralysis with large catalogs.
That's right. And again, something akin to the highest level of relevance. Because I don't want to see a bunch of wedding apparel. If you're like, oh, okay, well, my product category is wedding apparel for women, and you're great. Well, then don't give me a dress that would be totally inappropriate for a beach. You're like, oh, that is what you should be wearing if you're going to a cathedral, right, in the wintertime. So that's the great way, having a little bit of that intelligence. And that's what RAG can do for you, right? Having that intelligence behind how your products are being sorted and then recommended. That's what gives you a whole new level of relevance than just regular product search terms or categories like we would have had in the past.
It's a term that I'm not sure if you've coined, but it's definitely in Plasty Llama's narrative, and it's never being finished. And I think it's a really interesting quote. Can you talk a bit about that? Like, how can Shopify merchants kind of build what we're talking about here, this kind of UX optimization, like kind of into their ongoing process, but rather than treating it kind of like a one and done project? Because I think that's a big fail if that kind of happens.
I'll double down on that. We talk about this to merchants regularly, right? Is your website's not done. It's a living thing. So kind of think about it like tending a garden. You have a garden, you get a harvest, you're planting seeds, and you're like, for the next season, whatever, you're like, okay, that thing's running, but you still have to weed it. And maybe you need to plant marigolds in there because you're dealing with certain insects that are eating your crop. Like, there's constant maintenance. And then on top of that, as the user expectation and experience changes, you have to respond to that too. What we would encourage people to do is pick a couple of North Stars that you want to use as guiding points. Like, maybe that's decision speed and people's self-serve answer rate. And then you can do like a weekly 30-minute conversion stand-up, for example. And like, hey, what's happening with our North Stars? What are the top 3 friction signals? What's 2 fixes that we can ship to help address those? And then kill anything that's a loser in there, and then pick your next A/B test right? So that being important too is you might have an idea about how a user wants to interact with it, but then when you put it out there, you find out that that's not what people are actually doing. So don't be afraid to get rid of something that you thought was a good idea if the data proves to you that it isn't. And then you can run a little scorecard, which could be like 8 to 10 signals. And I would do this mobile first. What's your product display page to add to cart time? What's your time to first add to cart? What's people's zero results percentage? What's their filter use plus their post-filter bounce? What's their cart to checkout click-through rate? What's their express pay usage? All of these metrics, they become your scorecard for, well, how is my site currently doing? And if you start to see some of those things fall off, then it's a red flag or at least a yellow flag that you might want to address that. And then we would encourage people to consider using RAG for the why. And that could be a cluster search, chat, tickets, reviews into themes with citations, and then mapping each scheme to a UX fix. And so if you have RAG that's having this conversation with your clients and you're seeing the kind of results that that's giving them in terms of surfacing, let's say, relevant other products or something like that, you can also go back and query that on RAG and say, okay, what are you seeing? Like, where are people getting frustrated? What kind of product categories are they going to search for? And that's giving you a broad understanding, but the ability to drill down into specifics because it's sort of mapping all of that. So that's something we encourage people to do. And then you can run a simple experiment loop on those things. What's your hypothesis? What are your metrics and your guardrails? Who's the owner? And then decide in 2 or 3 weeks and then keep it or kill it. And think about guardrails for mobile, tap, and spacing tokens. And then what is your zero results? Can that be less than 5%? If it's getting higher than that, what do you need to change about that experience? And then for roles, you have different goals that marketing is going to own. Data is going to prep the briefs. Your devs are going to ship it. So make sure that you have those things properly associated too. The majority of sites are being run by marketers. So marketing should really guide a lot of that experience in that conversation. And it's interesting because when we run into organizations or clients where their sites are being run more by IT, it's very different because IT guys want it to be simple and they want it to be secure and they want it to be connected, but that's not necessarily the same considerations that you need for what that UX is going to do, which we already know is now the most important thing in that path to purchase is UX. And marketers are thinking a lot more about the UX side of things. So there's a degree to which you do want them to sort of be owning how that experience is going to be for your customers. So you want to treat UX like inventory. Check it weekly, fix your leaks quickly, and then keep only that which is going to move the North Star.
From a development or any kind of site edits and audits, what do you believe some of the next steps? Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to run out of time. And so this is going to go out in September and people are listening and saying, hey, is now the right time or should I wait till Q1 of next year to start implementing things? Or are there things that maybe some people, you guys can do some of the work. Maybe some people are listening are in the early days of their journey and they want to DIY it themselves. I'm just curious on kind of like where we're at today. What are you recommending people to do so they can have a successful Q4?
I'll hit that on 2 fronts because, of course, we're already thinking about the holiday season being right around the corner, which is terrifying. You're like, hold on, but it's only August. And you're like, yeah, but you're prepped for this. Like, you got to be thinking about it, right? So the first one is that anyone, especially D2C, right? You could run a quick self-audit on your phone with your store. Can you find a relevant product in less than 30 seconds? Can you reach checkout in less than a minute from a product display page? Then is search obvious and are filter chips just a tap away? Do you always see add to cart on your product display page and your checkout/express pay in cart? Can you edit cart items without losing your place? That's so frustrating if you got to go back and change, size or quantity from somewhere else. And then are delivery, ETA, and returns visible before checkout? Anyone could do that right now. If you have a store, just run that little self-audit and give yourself a little bit of a reality check. And then on a totally different side, this is what I would say because we run into this a lot. And this has to do with what we call buyer portals for B2B. And so I know we're heading into Q4, but my response to that would be, it's never too early to start on this. The purchaser experience in the business mindset has also shifted significantly. And especially as millennials have moved up in the workforce and then you have Gen Z coming into the workforce more, the buyer experience for even B2B purchasers, they want it to be akin to their individual purchasing experience. And again, we know UX matters so much. So there's sort of more lenience in a B2B context for people to maybe be willing to, send something off to get a quote or something like that. But ideally, can they log into their account online, not have to involve a sales rep to put an order together, check their invoices, go through their checkout. Even if they want to put it all together and then send it off and then they need to get a quote back, that's an option, but give them the ability to self-service as much as possible, because we self-service our purchases online as individuals. In a B2B context, we know more and more rapidly B2B purchasers want to be able to do the same thing. So if you're like, well, I sell B2B, e-commerce isn't really relevant to me. No, you sell to someone. You sell your products to someone. Give them the ability to have that much better of an experience online through a buyer portal, not dissimilar to what you would do in a D2C context.
I also think about this Q4 time, if you don't have some kind of a loyalty program set up, there's going to be, a lot of buyers out there. And we know that we're trying to get share of wallet, but it also gives the opportunity of saying that when someone does buy, or I do have a loyalty program, if you don't have one right now, that's a fairly easy add-on, because I think when you think about just the customer lifetime value increases that go along with brands that have a loyalty program, it's very significant. And it could be points, it can be a reward system. I call it like a high impact tactic, but it seems like when you have that available, it just keeps you closer to the brand, knowing that, well, I already like shopping here anyways. I shop at Tommy Bahama, I shop at Viore, I shop at all these different places. It's and I have loyalty programs in there too. I love seeing the points when I click and log in. Oh, Steve, by the way, you have $38 remaining in your account that you can apply at any time towards your next purchase. That's pretty exciting. If you don't have that right now, I think it's another little small kind of low-hanging fruit that I think could be easily implemented by adding on, one of these solutions that are available at Shopify.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And so we talk about this a lot in other contexts, which is how do you gamify this? And so, for example, I've been an REI member for a long time, and REI does a fantastic job of this. So a few things that I get as an REI member, right? I can Not only do I earn points on all my purchases, and so then at the end of the year, they're like, hey, you've accrued $100 in points. Okay, well, now maybe there's some piece of gear that I wanted, but I wasn't quite sure, and now I get to get that for myself at no cost or significantly reduced cost. So that feels like a special little present. REI gave me that experience. The other thing is it gives me access to what they call their garage sales. And so I can go in there and I have access to gear which people have tested and returned. So you're talking lightly used or even like new in a lot of cases, and it is steeply discounted. So maybe I pick up a great pair of boots for 50% of retail price because someone hiked 10 miles in them and then decided that wasn't quite the right fit for them, and then they sent them back to REI. And so all of this it's kind of that gamifying. You talk about how positive that experience is. So I would say to anyone, give yourself the ability to do that and then roll that out. Give yourself time to test it leading up to Black Friday, which you can do now if you start early. And then your VIP sellers are going to feel that much more special and that much more connected to your brand, which means they're that much more likely to make a purchase. And you can give them the option to make those purchases, hey, before everybody else coming up on Black Friday. You can get a little bit of FOMO there. Like you have the option to buy before anybody else with these kinds of discounts because we really appreciate your loyalty to us.
So you're talking about like early access to potentially, in your case, slightly used, but even early access to new products or even exclusive sales, maybe for top tier members or whatever. I think there's such a great opportunity to build this community. Even like VIP events, I've even seen that a lot where almost like you create this emotional bond to the brand kind of beyond the transaction because, you're a VIP member of this brand and all of a sudden, maybe you get bonuses like, I don't know, free shipping thresholds because you're a VIP. Number one, you understand the lifetime value of the customer and then they're signed up to the program, they're earning points, they're getting these VIP kind of push notifications or emails or text. Overall, it just continues this kind of like flywheel effect.
And we know that so many brands now are something more akin to a lifestyle statement for people, because the reality is there's so many options out there that I could pick between a dozen different, let's say, fitness apparel brands, and all of their product is relatively equivalent to one another. But if I like the certain feel, the connection, the VIP points that I get, the experience I have with one of these vendors, I'm far more likely to continue with them than switch, because now this thing helps define who I am and my external appearance to other people.
And there are some really great tools, just by the way, like this is not something that needs to be custom built. I mean, Loyalty Lions out there, Smile.io, there's a lot of connections out there that you can have. I mean, there's even some enterprise and mid-market stuff. If you think about Yotpo, for example, and a few others out there that grow Wave. But there's great tools out there that can easily add on through an app. They can be skinned up nicely, and that like they're fully integrated into the customer experience. It's not a massive overhaul, but if you don't have a loyalty and rewards and kind of word of mouth kind of thing, or a VIP program, it's fairly simple to kind of implement that sort of thing. And I'm sure that, you and your team could walk through some and help vet some of the solutions depending on the size of the business and stuff like that. So we're nearing the kind of end of the show for today. I've learned a lot, and I think we're sharing a lot. Things that we've learned. I think Q4 is an important time right now. You clearly have talked about AI and kind of the UX optimizations. It's extremely important. Like, what are some kind of final takeaways and next steps for those listening? Because we do have a couple different camps of people, I think, that are listening today. There's going to be the early stage people that are, maybe they're on Shopify Core right now. They're trying to get product market fit. They want to have a great Q4 and they're really trying their best. And that's what they're here today to learn. Is there any small takeaways for the early stage people? And then maybe the other side of the question that you can help me with is like, what about the people that are firmly entrenched in the mid-market to enterprise, and kind of like, what are you recommending to those people in those camps?
We're huge proponents of people getting their data in order. And here's why this applies to both things. If you're early on and you're just starting out, then data, if you get that right, gives you so much insight into what's actually happening. It can really drive your decision-making, your products, your promotions. And if you're mid-market, we run into this a lot with mid-market merchants as well, as if their data is not in order, there's a huge opportunity there that you're missing out on. So the ability to build out something like a data lake is so much easier than it was in the past. And then the ability to query and analyze against that with modern AI tooling is so much easier than it was in the past. So the ability to get good insights has dropped. Let's say the barrier for entry to that has dropped dramatically. And it's worth noting that, let's say that you put an AI analysis layer on top of your data. Well, if your data is bad, then all you're doing is using AI to get bad answers faster. But don't miss out on that opportunity. There's mountains of it being developed, and that's the peek behind the curtain. So it doesn't need to be based on your perceptual sentiment or just the sentiment of your buyers. You're like, well, what's actually making a difference here? And data is the answer for how to get that. So I would say for people who are just starting out, think about how you can be building out your tech stack to prepare yourself to properly capture and analyze that kind of data in the future. And storage is so much cheaper than it used to be, so you can get it and put it in the lake and you don't have to do anything with it right now. And then if you're mid-market and you don't have a good system in place for doing that, I would say, hey, now's the time to start, because the advantages are lost if you're not capturing and analyzing all of the data that's being spun off from your site and your user interactions.
This is amazing. It's funny you talk about the AI side of it, and I kind of been using a new tool lately. Well, I don't know how new it is, but it's called ZipChat. But the nice thing about it is that you have to kind of get out there and try it. One thing that they talk about is like their conversations that can happen where, hey, a visitor came in, it queried the chat, and then it asked a certain question. I can see the whole message here under the conversation. And then the tool, this kind of shows you the advancement of kind of AI and kind of where we're at today. There's a link that says make a correction, because here's the answer that the RAG made, the AI, the large language model that's connected to after importing all of the data and all of the FAQs and product information. Here's the answer that it made to, in this particular case, this particular customer. And then there's a button that said, make a correction. So then you can go in and actually retype the answer or give the appropriate link or share the proper product that should have been that. And then over time, you're just improving these systems overall. So I think that's the kind of one. I just want to give you a live example of kind of what I've been seeing right now. And I know that you probably have a very similar sentiment that we just got to try these tools, but we also have to have a tiny bit of skepticism. But we have to go in there and monitor and understanding the data and helping these solutions to be most effective for each business.
I couldn't agree with that more, except I would actually double down on what you said and said you should have a decent amount of skepticism. And actually, we wrote on this recently. We talked about this in an interview. They were asking us about that. And I was like, listen, you should be skeptical of what your AI is telling people because you need to think of it more like a human. Humans make mistakes. So a computer program and the way that they would run historically is usually either it worked or it didn't work, right? It was kind of a yes or no, on or off switch. But AI is not like that. AI is more like a human, and it's prone to the same kind of mistakes that a human makes. So maybe its data is bad, or maybe it answered with the wrong context. So you should be, trust but ask questions at the same time, let's say, right? So trust but verify. And you're like, okay, like I don't want to just ignore this and pretend like it's not here. Nope, bring it in and get to know it and get to understand it. But at the same time, do be skeptical about its responses and make sure that it's in the right guardrails so that it's actually bringing value to your org.
Yeah, this is amazing. Well, Greg, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show today. For those that are listening, the company is Classy Llama, CLASSY, and LLAMA.com. So Classy Llama. You can go there. You have a lot of really great case studies. You're in a lot of industries. I know you're really doubling down on B2B. You're really doubling down now on the Shopify and the Shopify Plus ecosystem and working towards some certifications there. And clearly, you're also here flagging the sand when it comes to AI and helping people from making intelligent kind of UX decisions. So I just wanted to thank you for coming on the show today. I wish you continued success in the Shopify world and helping brands. And I think we got a lot of great insights that people can take for the DIYers and for those that want to actually improve their business in any capacity. Then I just sure we can reach out to your team and get in touch with people over on your side.
Yeah, certainly. Our pleasure, Steve. Thanks for having us.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of eCommerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.